In the heart of Port Harcourt's Grey Phase 2, where tree-lined streets hid mansions behind tall, ornate gates, stood Miriam Okorie's pride and joy, Okorie Luxe Fabrics. The boutique was a gallery of color and culture, with shimmering Ankara prints, delicate lace, flowing silks, and intricate brocade that drew in the city's elite. Inside, glass display cases gleamed, hand-carved wooden shelves added warmth, and the faint scent of lavender hung in the air. At 60, Miriam carried herself with the poise of a queen and the kindness of a beloved mother figure. Her hair, streaked with elegant silver, was always neatly tied in a bun. Her deep brown eyes held a mixture of wisdom and a quiet longing. She had built this life through resilience after losing her husband years ago. She poured her energy into the boutique, turning it into a household name in Port Harcourt's fashion circles. Her assistant, F.A. Omarobe, a cheerful young woman in her 20s, bustled in each morning, greeting her warmly. Customers, politicians' wives, corporate executives, and society ladies came not just for fabrics, but for Miriam's personal touch. She listened to their stories, celebrated their wins, and offered quiet encouragement during their struggles. But when the day's work ended, the boutique's brightness faded into the solitude of Miriam's cozy apartment in Rumabekwe. The walls carried framed photographs, her late husband smiling under a mango tree, her daughter Amarachi in a graduation gown. Amarachi lived abroad now, carving her own path, calling often but unable to fill the silence of the rooms. Miriam's evenings were simple: a steaming bowl of fisherman's soup, a glass of warm tea, the hum of the city beyond her window. Yet beneath her contentment lingered an ache she rarely voiced. She missed companionship, the easy laughter of someone who saw her not as Madame Miriam, the businesswoman, but as a woman with a heart still capable of love. Still, every morning she rose with purpose, opened the boutique's doors, and faced the day with grace. What she didn't know was that fate, in a heavy Port Harcourt rain, was about to rewrite the script of her life. It was a Friday evening in Port Harcourt, and the sky had turned an ominous shade of gray. Miriam had just left a small dinner gathering with two longtime friends in D-Line, her laughter still warm in her chest as she drove through Transamati. Halfway home, the heavens opened. Rain pelted down in sheets, drumming against her windscreen. The streets emptied quickly, the city's usual bustle silenced by the storm. Then, without warning, her car jolted and rolled to a slow, helpless stop. The dashboard lights flickered and died. Miriam's heart sank. She tried the ignition twice, nothing. She reached for her phone, only to realize there was no signal. Outside, the rain turned the road into a blur of glistening puddles. The isolation pressed in, and for the first time in years, she felt vulnerable. Headlights appeared in the distance, slicing through the curtain of rain. A motorcycle slowed beside her, its rider pulling off a rain-soaked helmet. He was tall, lean, and no older than his late 20s, his white shirt plastered to his skin by the downpour. "Ma, are you all right?" he called over the rain. Miriam cracked her window, relief flooding her voice. "My car just stopped. I can't get it to start." "I'm Chike," he said, parking his motorcycle. "Let me take a look." She hesitated. The world could be dangerous, but something in his eyes carried sincerity. Within moments, Chike was bent over the engine, his hands moving with practiced precision despite the water streaming down his arms. "You know your way around cars," Miriam remarked as he worked. He smiled faintly. "Mechanical engineering graduate, just not many jobs right now, so I make deliveries to get by." 5 minutes later, the car roared back to life. Miriam's gratitude was immediate and warm. "Chike, you've saved me tonight. Let me give you a ride home. It's the least I can do." On the short drive, they spoke like old acquaintances, discovering a shared love for traditional Nigerian food and old highlife music. By the time she dropped him off near mile 4, their brief encounter had already taken root as something more. They exchanged numbers before parting, the rain easing into a gentle drizzle. Miriam drove away, unaware that this young man, drenched and smiling under the streetlight, would soon stir her life in ways she hadn't dared to imagine in years. In the days after their rainy night meeting, Miriam found herself thinking about Chike more than she expected. His quiet humility, His determination to keep going despite his setbacks, it lingered with her like a pleasant song stuck in her mind. One Monday afternoon, while arranging a fresh delivery of silk fabrics from Abuja in her boutique, Miriam's phone buzzed. "Chike, good afternoon, Ma. I hope you're well. Just wanted to say thank you again for the ride the other night." She smiled at the message, fingers hovering over the keypad before she replied, "Good afternoon, Chike. I should be the one thanking you for rescuing me from that rain. How's work?" That small exchange opened the door. Soon they were meeting in cafes around Port Harcourt, a tiny tea shop in Rumola one week, a bustling suya stand in Woji the next. Their conversations flowed easily. Chike told her about his struggles in the job market, his dream of designing energy-efficient engines, and the odd jobs he took just to keep his younger siblings in school. Miriam shared stories of building her boutique from scratch, of losing her husband but refusing to let grief swallow her life. She didn't speak like a distant mentor. She spoke like someone who understood what it meant to start with little and fight for every step forward. They laughed over plates of jollof rice and peppered fish, sometimes forgetting the age difference that the world would never fail to notice. But outside their private bubble, whispers began to rise. Customers exchanged knowing glances when Chike dropped by the boutique to help Efe carry heavy boxes. An old acquaintance teased Miriam gently, "So, Madam Miriam, is this your new driver or your new bodyguard?" Others weren't as kind, muttering that it was improper for a woman her age to be spending so much time with a man barely in his 30s. Miriam didn't confront them. She had learned long ago that people's tongues would wag whether she lived boldly or quietly. But she also didn't deny to herself that she was enjoying his company more than she'd allowed herself to enjoy anyone's in years. In Chike's presence, the heavy silence of her evenings was replaced by anticipation. And though neither had said the words out loud, something unspoken had already begun to grow between them. It was a late Saturday afternoon when Miriam and Chike found themselves in a quiet corner of Palm Court Cafe, a small, tastefully decorated spot tucked away in Gray Phase 3. Outside, the Port Harcourt streets hummed with weekend life music drifting from open bars, the distant sound of church choirs rehearsing for Sunday service. They sat across from each other, sharing a plate of meat pies and steaming cups of zobo. Chike had been unusually quiet that day, his easy smile replaced by a thoughtful gaze that seemed fixed on the table. "Miriam," he began slowly, his deep voice steady but laced with something heavier. "There's something I've been meaning to tell you for a while now." She looked up, curiosity softening her features. "What is it?" Chike took a breath, as though steadying himself for a climb. "I know there's a big difference in our ages. I know people talk, believe me, I hear it too, but I can't pretend anymore. You've become one of the most important people in my life. Your strength, your wisdom, the way you make me feel like I'm capable of more than I thought. I've fallen for you." Miriam froze, the words hanging in the air like a fragile piece of glass. She had grown deeply fond of Chike, but hearing it said so plainly startled her. Her mind immediately raced to the whispers, the raised eyebrows, the inevitable questions from Amarachi if she ever found out. "Chike," she said softly, fingers tracing the rim of her cup. "I care for you too, more than I expected. But this isn't simple. People can be cruel, and I don't want you to carry a burden because of me." He leaned forward, his eyes locking onto hers. "I'm not afraid of them. What matters to me is us. You've brought so much light into my life, Miriam. I just want the chance to do the same for you." Her chest tightened. Not from fear, but from the sincerity radiating across the small table. She withdrew her hand from the cup and placed it gently over his. "Then let's take it one step at a time," she said finally. "We'll be careful, we'll be mindful, but we won't let fear decide for us." They sat in quiet agreement, the noise of the cafe fading into the background. Outside, the sky began to turn gold, and in that moment, something unshakable was set in motion, a promise made not in grand gestures, but in mutual courage. 3 months passed, and Miriam's life felt lighter. Chike had become a constant presence, helping out at the boutique when his courier jobs were light, joining her for Sunday services at her church in Rumibekwe, and filling her evenings with conversations that made the hours fly. But until now, their relationship had lived quietly in the spaces between public and private. That changed when Miriam received an invitation to the Royal Imperial Charity Gala in Port Harcourt, the kind of high-profile event where the city's elite gathered in glittering gowns and finely tailored suits. For years, Miriam had attended alone. This time, she decided otherwise. "Chike," she said one evening over dinner, "I want you to come with me to the gala, as my partner." His smile was immediate, but there was a flicker of caution in his eyes. "Are you sure? You know people will talk." "I've lived enough years to know they'll talk no matter what," she replied, her tone calm but resolute. The night of the event, Miriam stepped into the grand hall on Chike's arm. She wore a floor-length emerald gown that shimmered under the chandeliers, while he looked sharp in a dark tailored suit. Conversations paused as they walked past. Some smiled and nodded warmly. Others leaned into each other's ears, their whispers barely concealed. An old friend approached, eyes darting between them. "Miriam, you look radiant. And who is this young gentleman?" "This is Chike Nwosu," she said without hesitation. "My partner." Chike greeted her with a firm handshake and an easy confidence that surprised even Miriam. Throughout the night, they laughed, mingled, and danced, choosing to focus on each other rather than the eyes following them. By morning, the city's gossip circles had new material. Social media pages posted their photographs with captions ranging from "Love wins" to "Gold digger alert." Miriam refused to let it rattle her. "Chike," she told him over breakfast, "we can't control their voices. What we can control is how we live." And so, they carried on a public declaration made a silent dare to anyone who believed love should fit within their narrow definitions. Not long after the gala, the whispers on the streets reached the one place Chike had hoped they wouldn't, his family home in Rumwokota. It began subtly. A cousin mentioned seeing his photo with Miriam online. An aunt made a pointed joke at a family gathering. Then one Sunday after church, his mother, Mrs. Chike Nwosu, asked him to stay behind. They sat at the small dining table, the air thick with unspoken tension. "Chike," she began, her tone measured but firm. "People are talking. This woman you're seeing, she's old enough to be your mother." Chike kept his gaze steady. "Her name is Miriam, Mom, and I love her." His mother's brows drew together. "Love? Chike, she's 60, past childbearing age. Do you want to grow old without a family of your own? Without children?" "Mom," he said gently, "a family is built on love and respect, not just on having children. And Miriam has given me more encouragement and belief in my future than anyone else." Mrs. Nwosu sighed deeply, her voice tightening. "I know she's a good woman, but I fear for you. People will never let you live this down. They'll question your motives, insult you, maybe even pity you. I want more for my son than a life defending his choices." Chike reached across the table and took her hand. "Mom, I hear your fears, but this isn't something I stumbled into blindly. Miriam brings joy to my life. She pushes me to grow. I've thought about this and I'm sure." She didn't reply immediately. Her fingers twitched under his, as though she wanted to pull away but couldn't. "I can't say I approve," she murmured finally, "but you are my son. Just be careful." As he walked home later that evening, Chike knew her heart hadn't shifted, not yet. But the conversation had been a line in the sand. He had chosen his path, and now it was time to walk it, no matter who stood at the edges whispering their doubts. It was a humid Thursday afternoon when Miriam introduced Chike to Chief Emeka Ezenwa, an old classmate and owner of one of the largest engineering firms in the Southeast. They met at the boutique where Chief Emeka had come to purchase premium brocade for his wife. During their conversation, Miriam mentioned Chike's engineering background. The chief's interest was immediate. "Send me your CV," he told Chike. "We've been looking for fresh minds in our Enugu branch. You might be a good fit." 2 weeks later, Chike received the offer, a well-paying position in Enugu with opportunities for growth. For years, he had dreamed of a chance like this. But it came with a cost, moving away from Port Harcourt and from Miriam. That evening, they sat in Miriam's softly lit living room, the aroma of fresh fish pepper soup in the air. Chike held the printed offer letter in his hands like something both precious and heavy. "Miriam," he began, "this job could change everything for me. But it's in Enugu. I don't want to leave you. She looked at him for a long moment, her heart torn between selfishness and love. Then she reached out, her hand resting gently on his. Chike, you must go. Opportunities like this don't come twice. Our bond is strong enough to survive the distance. Are you sure? He asked, his voice betraying the fear behind his resolve. I'm sure, she said, smiling softly. We will make it work. I want you to succeed. Chike, not just for us, but for you. When he left for Enugu a month later, the distance hit them harder than either expected. They kept in touch through video calls and messages, but the nights felt colder. Miriam filled her time with work. Chike buried himself in the new role, determined to prove himself. Outside their private struggles, the gossip grew louder. Some hinted that the separation meant the relationship would fade. Others suggested Chike would meet someone more suitable. Miriam brushed off the comments in public, but alone, doubts crept in. Still, each call from Chike, each reminder of his love and gratitude became an anchor in the storm. And though the road between Port Harcourt and Enugu was long, neither was ready to let go of the journey they had started together. 6 months after Chike's move to Enugu, the rhythm of long-distance calls had become both a comfort and a reminder of what was missing. The late-night laughter over video chats, the good morning texts, they kept the connection alive, but they could not replace the warmth of sitting across from each other. One Friday evening, as Miriam was locking up her boutique, she turned and froze. There he was, Chike standing by the entrance, grinning under the warm glow of the street lamp. You didn't tell me you were coming, she said, her voice catching as she stepped into his embrace. I wanted to surprise you, he replied, holding her tight. And because I've made up my mind about something important. Later in her living room over a simple dinner, Chike took her hand, his thumb brushing against her skin. Miriam, these months apart have been hard, but they've also shown me just how much I want to build my life with you. I don't care what anyone says, I want us to be official. Her heart raced, caught between joy and disbelief. Chike, she began, but he was already reaching into his jacket pocket. He placed a simple but elegant gold ring on the table. Marry me, Miriam. Let's stop living halfway and choose each other completely. Tears welled in her eyes. She thought of the stares at the gala, the whispers in her community, the disapproval from his mother, and yet all she felt in that moment was the strength of his conviction. Yes, she whispered. Then louder. Yes, Chike. They announced their engagement the next week. Friends and clients congratulated her warmly, but the news stirred fresh waves of skepticism. Some saw romance, others saw scandal. Mrs. Chike Nwosu, still unconvinced, confronted Chike again. This is not what I imagined for you. But this time, Chike stood taller. Mom, this is my choice, and I have no regrets. Though she remained distant, Miriam noticed a softening in the older woman's eyes, as if, despite herself, she was beginning to understand that what bound them went far deeper than age. The wedding was small, but beautiful, a soft December afternoon in a private garden in Port Harcourt's Grey Phase 1. The sun filtered through palm fronds as friends and family gathered under a canopy draped in cream and gold. Miriam wore a simple, elegant lace gown. Chike stood beside her in a deep navy suit, his smile unwavering. Some guests came with genuine joy, others came out of curiosity, still unsure of this unlikely match. But when Miriam and Chike exchanged vows, their voices steady and eyes locked, the sincerity of their love silenced even the most cynical. They began married life with ease, settling into a rhythm of shared breakfasts, evening walks, and long talks about dreams they still hoped to chase. Miriam felt a warmth in her days she hadn't known since her youth. Chike, now thriving in his engineering role in Enugu, but able to spend more time in Port Harcourt, seemed energized, more focused than ever. Then, 3 months into their marriage, Miriam began feeling unusually tired. At first, she blamed the demands of running the boutique and hosting family visits. But when nausea set in, a quiet suspicion took hold, a thought she almost laughed off as impossible. One afternoon, while Chike was at work, she bought a pregnancy test. Sitting alone in the bathroom, her hands trembled as the result appeared. Positive. When Chike came home that evening, He found her seated on the edge of their bed, the test in her hand, tears in her eyes. "Miriam," he said, alarmed, "what's wrong?" She looked up at him, her voice barely above a whisper. "Chike, I'm pregnant." He froze, disbelief flickering across his face before joy overtook it. "Pregnant? But how?" He knelt in front of her, taking her hands in his. "I don't know," she said, laughing through her tears, "but somehow it's happened." News of the pregnancy spread quickly, shocking friends, family, and the community. Amarachi, her daughter abroad, was stunned but supportive. Even Mrs. Chike Nwosu, who had clung to her doubts, found herself speechless. For Miriam and Chike, it felt like the universe's way of affirming their choice, proof that love could still make room for miracles. Miriam's pregnancy became the talk of Port Harcourt. At 60, carrying a child was unheard of, yet month after month, she glowed with health, her boutique still thriving as she prepared for motherhood. Chike was by her side for every doctor's visit, proudly holding her hand in waiting rooms, where curious glances turned into warm smiles. Amarachi flew in from abroad during the 7th month, her initial shock replaced by protective excitement. "Mom," she said one evening, as they folded baby clothes in the nursery, "you've always been a fighter. But this is something else." The day labor began, the skies over Port Harcourt were heavy with rain, as though echoing the night Miriam and Chike first met. Chike rushed her to a private maternity hospital, his voice steady as he whispered encouragement through each contraction. Hours stretched into what felt like forever. Then a cry pierced the air. The doctor smiled. "Congratulations, you have a healthy baby boy." Relief washed over them, but moments later, another cry rang out. The doctor looked at them in surprise. "And a healthy baby girl." Miriam and Chike stared at each other in disbelief, tears spilling freely. Twins, a double blessing neither had imagined. Chike cradled his son. Miriam held her daughter close, both overwhelmed by the weight of the moment. News of the birth traveled fast. Friends, clients, and neighbors visited with flowers and gifts. Even Mrs. Chike Nwosu, holding her grandchildren for the first time, whispered through tears, "You've shown me that love knows no boundaries." For Miriam, the twins were more than children. They were living proof that life still had surprises, that love could defy expectation, and that sometimes the impossible was simply waiting for the right moment to arrive. Life after the twins' arrival was a whirlwind of midnight feedings, soft lullabies, and the joyful chaos of a home filled with new life. Miriam's once quiet apartment now echoed with giggles and the shuffle of tiny feet. Those sleepless nights tested their patience. She and Chike moved through each day with a shared purpose that only deepened their bond. The boutique, Okorie Luxe Fabrics, flourished more than ever. Miriam, though now balancing motherhood, expanded her operations, opening 2 new branches in Port Harcourt. Her loyal customers often visited just to see the miracle twins, leaving with fabrics and blessings in equal measure. Chike's career also soared. His dedication in the Enugu branch earned him a promotion, and soon he was overseeing projects that made headlines in Nigeria's engineering circles. Yet, no matter how demanding his work, he was home every weekend, often arriving late Friday night just to kiss his children goodnight. Amarachi visited more often, her once skeptical heart now softened by the sight of her mother's happiness. "You're proof, Mom," she said one afternoon, rocking her baby sister, "that love doesn't follow rules, it writes its own." Even Mrs. Chike Nwosu had transformed. Where she once carried doubt, she now carried her grandchildren proudly to church, telling anyone who asked, "God's ways are beyond understanding." In the evenings, Miriam and Chike would sit on their balcony after the twins had fallen asleep, watching the lights of Port Harcourt twinkle in the distance. "We've come a long way," Chike would say, his hand finding hers. "And we'll go even further," Miriam would reply with a smile. "Because what we've built isn't just a marriage, it's a legacy." Their journey, once questioned by many, had become a quiet beacon in their community. People no longer whispered in doubt. They spoke in admiration. And as the twins grew, surrounded by love, laughter, and the example of 2 people who had dared to defy convention, Miriam and Chike knew they had proven a simple truth. Love, when rooted in respect, faith, and commitment, can outlast judgment and even create miracles.